So in your notes, you wanted to date today's date as January 27th. And we're completing the square today to solve quadratics. I want you to be sure you write that phrase, completing the square. Our standard says that we're able to solve quadratics not only by finding square roots or factoring, but there's another method known as completing the square. In the next assignment I'll give you, that assignment will be H2. I'm actually going to look at a couple problems in that assignment. So you might want to write these down. You'll have an answer to go ahead and input in TeacherMade. So it's kind of like a couple of free problems. These aren't really completing the square problems. They're kind of an extension of solving by square roots. But we're going to need this type of problem to move into the next part. So if you would, in that assignment on H2, this will be problem number 11. You might want to label it number 11. And the problem itself is x plus 5 squared equals 81. Now, this is different because that we have a binomial that is squared instead of just a variable squared. But we can still take the square root of both sides. And when we take the square root of both sides, because there's a variable involved, we do know that our answer will be either positive or negative square root of 81. All right, so the square root of, in parentheses, x plus 5 squared. So x plus 5, everything in that parentheses is what's squared. The square root of that's just x plus 5. And my answer is plus or minus the square root of 81, or 9. So the process to finish solving this equation is similar to everything we've done. It's x plus 5. We need to subtract 5 from both sides. And we're really going to have two problems here. We're going to have x equals positive 9 minus 5. And x equals the negative 9 minus 5. Those are my two answers. So 9 minus 5 is, yep, it's 4. And a negative 9 and a negative 5 is a negative, yep, negative 14. Awesome. So those are my two answers. So it's basically kind of the same process. We're just extending that a little bit more. So I want to give you one more, and this one's a little more challenging just to look at together, and this is problem number 13. It's really not hard once we look at it, but when you see it initially, you're going to think it's a little more challenging. X minus 40 is going to be squared. So it's 2/3 times x minus 40 squared, and that equals 24. Again, both these problems will be on your homework assignment, okay? So you want to be sure to jot those down. So the first thing I see I've got to do is I've got to get rid of my fraction. I know to get rid of the fraction, I multiply by the reciprocal, 3/2, on both sides. Just like that. And because of that, I know that those will cancel each other out, which is what I want to have happen. And I get x minus 40 squared is equal to, now, this will be 24 divided by 2, which is 12 times 3, which is 36. We already know how to multiply a whole number times that fraction. The easiest thing is to divide by the denominator, multiply by the numerator. And we'll be sure to write it down. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x minus 40 squared is just x minus 40. And the square root of 36 is plus or minus 6. Two problems, x minus 40 equals 6, and x minus 40 equals negative 6. Want to add 40 to both sides. Let's cancel. I'm left with x equals 6 plus 40, or 46. And x is equal to negative 6 plus 40, or 34. So again, I'm not doing anything differently than finding the square root of both sides. I'm able to do that because that binomial itself is squared. If there is any other constant added to it or something, I've got to get rid of those things. So I'm down to just the binomial, the x minus 40, whatever's in parentheses squared before I take the square root. Now that brings us to today's topic, which is completing the square. Now, completing the square is pretty easy, really. It allows us to have yet another way to solve a quadratic equation. These are examples. These aren't found in the homework. So H2 homework assignment, we just looked at problems 11 and 13. Now, these are examples you need to have in your notebook. And we'll go over how to complete the square. This is example 1. It is x squared plus 4x. We want to complete the square. Let's talk about how you do that. First of all, we're going to look at the coefficient of the x term. Okay? So the coefficient of the x term, by the way, we label that term or that number to be b. Remember, a is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the constant. And so that number is found right there. It's 4. Okay? Our second step then is to take that x term, the b, the coefficient of the x term, and divide it by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. Then we'll take that answer and we will square it. So now 2 squared is 4. To complete the square, I will add a 4 right there. That completes the square. Let's get another example. Try it. It's really pretty easy. X squared minus 8x. Let's complete the square there. All right, so the b term, coefficient of x, is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 squared is 4 times 4, 16. So when I complete the square, we'll add a 16. I should mention to you that the b term is actually negative 8, and so that would be negative 4. But when I square negative 4, it becomes positive 16. And every time I complete the square, it will be a positive answer because I will have had to have squared it to get that. If I summarize how you complete the square, it's just going to be b divided by 2 squared. That would be a good way to write how you need to complete the square. I want to give you one for you to see if you can complete the square. Here we go. This is example number 3. It's x squared plus 12x. All right, so your job right now is to complete the square. If you're watching the video, pause it, come back and complete the square. And then unpause it when you've finished. So the b term is positive 12. Second step, important step, I'm divided by 2 and I'll get 6. And then I'll take 6 and I'll square it. That would be 6 times 6 or 36. So when I complete the square, it will be 36. Well, we know how to complete the square, but that doesn't tell us why that's beneficial yet. So we're going to use the process of completing the square to solve a quadratic equation. So let's look at that. Here's our 4th example. It is x squared minus 4x equals 3. And, you know, when we were completing the square a minute ago, they weren't equations. They were just the portion, okay? And I've got that portion I need. I've got the x squared minus 4x. I'm going to do that in order to solve it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite it and leave some space to complete the square. Now, remember, I'm going to look at the b term. The b term is negative 4. Divide that by 2, I get negative 2. Square it, I get positive 4. So when I complete the square, remember that part of completion or completing the square will always be positive. So it'd be plus 4. But remember, this is an equation. So if I add something to one side, I also have to do what? I have to add the other side. Absolutely. So this becomes x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 3 plus 4, or 7. Now here's why I want to do this. If this has been done correctly, if I've completed the square correctly, that's a perfect binomial square. And I can really factor it without even thinking. Let me show you what I mean. Pay close attention here. You don't want to miss this, okay? If I'm factoring it, the square root of x squared is just x. That answer would go here. And the square root of the c term, square root of 4 is 2. It would go here. And the sign is dictated by the second or the middle term. Once you practice that, you can do that quickly. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 is just x minus 2 squared. Okay? So it's fast. You can do it really fast, and it's really simple. And this looks like the problems we kind of started out with. I can take the square root now of both sides. And the square root of x minus 2 squared is just x minus 2. And that'll be equal to plus or minus radical 7. Now, it would have been really, really nice if radical 7 had been a perfect square and would have come out of that radical, but it didn't, and that's okay. We can leave that answer. We would call that a radical answer or an irrational answer. But we still want to simplify it a little bit. Remember, I know I need to add 2 to both sides. And I can write this answer this way. I can say, well, it's x equals, and I'm going to pull the 2 out front, okay? It won't add with radical 7 because the 7's on a radical sign, but I'm going to say 2 plus or minus radical 7. So I'm going to put my whole number first, and I'm going to put my radical second. So that's a radical answer, or I can take this answer and determine what is that answer to 2 decimal places. And so the way I would do that is, well, x is equal to 2 plus radical 7, or x is equal to 2 minus radical 7. That's the plus or minus radical 7 part. Now, I don't know what radical 7 is to decimal place, so I'll really need to resort to a calculator. This is one of the times that you really need kind of a calculator. So we'll use my TI-83, and I'm just going to say, well, what is 2 plus radical 7? And the cool thing about the TI-83 is it'll really enter just exactly the way it looks like on paper. I use second function and the x squared to access the square root sign. I get my square root sign. I'll put 7 and close that parentheses. It's going to tell me it's 4.645. Well, that means x is equal to 4.65 rounded to 2 decimal places. Got to do the same thing now and subtract radical 7. Calculator will only give you the right answer if you put in the right numbers. I think I missed there. Okay, so this would be x is equal to negative, I'm going to put a 0 point, it says 645, so it'll be 0.65. So that's a decimal answer. When I approximate the decimal, and then I also have my radical or my irrational answer. Let's look at another example, see how this works again. This is example 5, x squared plus 16x equals 36. So first thing I need to do is leave a little space to complete the square. All right, so it is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 squared is what? 64. So I'm going to add 64 to both sides. Remember, if I've completed the perfect square correctly, then I've got x plus 8 squared as my factorization. And that equals 36 plus 64, or 100. Next step is to take the square root of both sides. And I'll have x plus 8 because the square root of x plus 8 squared is just x plus 8. And I like this one a little better because this one has a perfect square root. The square root of 100 then would be plus or minus 10. Yeah, and I like that. It's a lot cleaner, you know. So I've got two answers here. X, I need to subtract 8 from both sides. And so my answer will be x equals positive 10 minus 8, or x equals negative 10 minus 8. No, I'm going to have two answers. I've taken care of that with my positive or negative 10. Here's my positive 10, here's my negative 10. So x equals 2, or x equals, negative 18. Good. I want to wrap this lesson up with one more example, and this time this is one for you to try, and then we'll come back and see if you got it correct. It's x squared minus 10x equals 11. So solve that equation by completing the square. You try that, and then we'll look at it together. All right, pause the recording if you would like to try this on your own. Let's see what answer you got. So I'm looking at negative 10. I know I'm going to take negative 10 and I divide it by 2. And when I divide it by 2, I'll get negative 5. And when I square that, I'll get a positive 25. So I know then to complete the square, I need to add 25 to both sides. This means that x squared minus 10x plus 25 will factor to be x. Okay, square root of x squared is x, square root of 25 is 5, and we need to bring a negative, so this will be x minus 5 squared equals 11 plus 25, or 36. Perfect. Now we want to take the square root of both sides, and we'll get x minus 5 equals plus or minus square root of 36 is 6. It's another one that works out evenly, which I do like. I need to add 5 to both sides. I'll have two answers because I've got plus or minus 6. So my answers will be x is equal to 6, positive 6 plus 5, or x will be equal to a negative 6 plus 5. All right, so 6 plus 5 is 11, so x is equal to 11, or x is equal to a negative 1. Awesome. Good job. So that's how we use completing the square as another way, and actually a pretty easy way, to solve quadratic equations.